Bravo.
And now it's a pleasure to present, and thanks to the Village Trip, and thank all of you for coming here. I'm going to join you in the audience to see if I get my IQ raised to hear two great people who are showing that New York City is still the center of all beautifulness when they have places like this. And thank the publishers for Gail Merrifield Papp and Joseph C. Wolfe.
Well, welcome. This is such a special occasion. I said before, I'm Wiley Hausam. The reason I'm here is because George and Gail asked me. But the reason that they asked me is that I worked with George as his agent before he became the producer of the Public Theater, and then for the next 7 or 8 years after that. So it's a pleasure and a privilege. We've got some slides up here that I thought maybe we would go through, so kind of like a little scrapbook. So you want to go to the next slide, please? So, you know Gail. But apart from all of this very impressive text on the screen, Gail was here with Joe for 26 years, running the play department in the most exemplary way, finding scripts like The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer, in its embryonic state, and seeing something in there that could make the brilliant play that it became. The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and many, many, many other playwrights, plays, musicals, and mentoring so many of the people in this audience. Next slide, please. George. Yay! With a long, long association at the Public Theater, you first had, I'll let you tell that story, but your first play here was The Colored Museum in 1986, a brilliant play. And then he became a director and started directing Jelly's Last Jam and many plays on Broadway. Became a resident director here in 1990-91, and ultimately in 1993, the producer of the Public Theater to 2005. And in fact, Joe's Pub is here because of George's idea. It was his idea, he made it happen. Maybe we'll talk about that a little more in a bit. So maybe can we start with a question for Gail? Gotta pick up your mic. It's working. I think your book is absolutely beautiful and moving and touching. And in addition, brings a whole new dimension to the portrayal of the Public Theater and of Joseph Papp. But maybe I should ask a very basic question. Why did you want to write it?
Well, I think the most honest answer I can give to that is that I miss Joe. And I found writing about my life in the theater with him renewed my conversations with him and my companionship with him in a way that was gratifying. That was the first impulse. It was just simply as a person, a human being, I missed him terribly. I wanted to recreate the people, places and politics of Joe's time here. And so my purpose kept enlarging. That's a long answer to your question, I guess.
And that's really evident in the book. The themes get bigger and bigger as it becomes more and more intimate. George, when you read Gail's book, what was the first thing that struck you?
Well, it's so much that has been written about Joe is you get the force, this gigantic, consuming, brilliant force. And the thing that happened for me was I felt like I was with the person, and that the person and that the person in the room was asking the questions, trying to figure it out, trying to put it all together. Then once he left the room, he became the force. But there was this process. I felt like I was invited into a process that I was not privy to as a person admiring this force. And so that was really fascinating and really intimate. And I was just telling Gail, it came to a section of the book where she's talking about where Joe debated Clive Barnes. Well, the thing that they were debating was about this production of Hamlet that, as it turns out in the book, which I did not know, Martin Sheen, until I read the book, that Martin Sheen was playing Hamlet. When I was 13 years old, my mother came to NYU one summer to do some advanced degree work. All of a sudden, there was this flurry of activity in Washington Square Park because we were staying right in a building right off of Washington Square Park, and it was the mobile unit. It gets better. The director of that production, I saw 3 plays that summer in New York City. The director of that production was Joseph Papp. The star of that production was Cleavon Little. And that was one of 3 plays that I saw in New York City that summer. And I remember there was a scene where either Hamlet climbed on top of Gertrude or Gertrude climbed on top of Hamlet. And these 2 winos, I'm from Frankfort, Kentucky. We don't have winos, so I just was guessing that they were winos. And there were these 2 winos that went, yeah, like that. And I think it fundamentally formed a vital part of my aesthetic in that moment. So I thank Joe I thank Joe for helping to form or warp or mess up or empower me to do, if you feel it, do it, go for it, and the winos will cheer. So that's right.
To bring this to a conclusion, the Times review appeared alongside an unprecedented black-framed editorial box next to the review, which refuted the claims of the play.
Wow.
Then the review appeared next to that.
Wow.
And the review by the unnamed person was very petty, didn't like it, picked all kinds of stuff. It was just terrible. When we read it, had it read out loud right after the opening night, there was a pall amongst the cast and so forth and so on. And Joe said to them, after having read it out loud to everybody, he said, be that as it may, I think this play is very important, and I think it should be kept going no matter what, and I'm going to run it as long as I can at the Public Theater. So we all cheered, and then it became the longest running play at the Public Theater. But what happened as a result of this lousy review in the Times by the unnamed person is that it did not get in competition for the Tony Awards. So that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Because it didn't go to Broadway until years later.
What?
Because it didn't go to Broadway until years later.
Yeah, it couldn't go to Broadway. So, fast forwarding, the play was revived. I'm going to hand it over to George now.
A brilliant production, powerful, moving, furious.
It was a very. I worked on a John Guare play which I deeply loved, and I was going, and dumb reviews. And so I was going, I'm not going to ever do anything uptown ever again, because it's, you can't, if you're not altering the conversation, why go there? And about the dog, Larry and the dog. No, Larry lived in the same building as Ed Koch. This is what if I tell the story wrong, somebody please correct me. But the story, as I told that one day Koch came down and Larry went, "You motherfucker, you blah, 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 blah," went off on him. And so they told him that if he did anything like that again, they were going to kick him out. So one day Larry's brilliant. Larry came down, he was walking his dog, and Koch walked in. And he bent down to the dog and said, "You see that man? He's the reason why Daddy's friends are all dying."
Oh my God. Would you like the last word, Gail?
Yes.
About last word. I don't know. Well, I don't know about the last word. Maybe I'll just say one brief thing. This is my very first book I've ever written. I undertook it for reasons I kind of mentioned earlier at a improbable stage in my life. So I also began to deal with certain aspects of ageist attitudes towards me. And as I was telling someone backstage earlier tonight, the way I dealt with that, or chose to deal with it, is by wearing zebra-striped tops. Because, I'll tell you why, because it's been proven scientifically, actually, that through the mysteries of evolution, the zebra developed its stripes in order to confuse the predators that might otherwise attack it. That's true. I'm not making it up. It's actually true. And the other thing is I found that I got less ageist reactions to myself if I wore this hat, which used to belong to Joe, and I love that hat. And young men, especially, will stop me on the street, and instead of making a face at me or, doing that, they'll say, "Hey, that's a great hat." Or they'll say, one gentleman last week said, "Oh, excuse me, where did you get that hat?" So between a hat and the zebra striped effect,
Thank you all so much for coming. Buy the book. The book's amazing. Beautiful, beautiful book.